She knelt amid shattered dishes, ears flat, whispering, "Please don't fire me," as I grabbed a towel instead. Stay with me to see how one spilled tray turned a terrified assistant into the bravest love of my life. The Helios ring never slept. It hung above the blue curve of the Allied world like a silver halo. Ports glowing with starship traffic, embassy towers lit in 100 colors and languages. Somewhere inside that labyrinth of polished corridors and guarded meetings, an overworked human liaison named Ryan Hale was trying to remember which datapad held the speech he was supposed to give in 8 minutes. "Assistant Nayali?" I muttered, turning in a circle in my office. "If you have secretly hidden my entire life's work again, I swear—" "It's on your desk, Director," came the calm reply from the doorway. I looked up. Sarah Nyali stood there in her crisp, dark dress, copper tail tucked neatly behind her legs, ears angled in polite amusement. A hollow slate rested in her hands, already open to the correct speech notes, color-coded, organized, and annotated in the margins with suggestions she would never claim credit for. "You moved it," I accused. "You left it in the break room," she said, completely straight-faced, "on top of the coffee machine, because that is clearly the most secure data storage solution on the station." I groaned, took the slate, and tried not to smile too obviously. Sarah's professionalism was legendary on the ring. Her people, the Vulpine Avari, were known for their poise and sharp memory. But she took it to another level. She remembered my appointments, my dietary needs, the exact way I liked my tea. She also remembered my worst habits and quietly compensated for them before anyone else noticed. No one ever saw her trip. No one ever saw her flustered. She glided through the embassy's glittering halls like a shadow that smelled faintly of citrus soap and Starship air recyclers, always in control, always 3 steps ahead. So when I later heard the crash from the corridor outside the diplomatic lounge, a violent shatter of ceramic and a startled cry, I didn't immediately think of Sarah. I thought of a dropped cargo case, or maybe one of the junior aides fumbling something. Then I stepped through the lounge door and saw her on her knees among the wreckage. The day had already been straining at the seams. 3 delegations, 2 overlapping emergencies, and 1 admiral who thought schedule was a suggestion, not a fundamental law of the universe. By midday, my voice was rough from calls, and Sarah had made a silent game of swapping my empty teacup with a fresh one every time I turned my back. "Last meeting before lunch," I promised her as we exited the conference room. "Then we can pretend we're normal employees who eat at sane hours. Director, you have never eaten at a sane hour in the entire time I have worked for you," she said. Her tail flicked once, fast, betraying a hint of amusement even as her expression stayed composed. "But I will accept this fantasy." She left to fetch food from the diplomatic mess while I finished a comm with Earth. I watched her go, heels quiet on the composite floor, ears perked, posture perfectly aligned. There was something soothing about the way she moved, like the orbit of a familiar moon. Reliable, predictable, safe. By the time I wrapped up the last call, my stomach was staging a rebellion. I stepped out into the corridor, rolling my shoulders, and headed toward the lounge where we usually took lunch when things were particularly frantic. The Helios ring formatted everything in soft whites and brushed metal. It was designed to look neutral, calm, civilized, even when the worlds represented inside were anything but. Today, the air hummed with distant conversation and the faint clatter of utensils. I reached for the lounge door. That was when I heard the crash. It sounded massive. A tray dropped from shoulder height, ceramic bowls exploding on impact, utensils skittering like metallic insects. A startled gasp followed, sharp and pained. My body moved before my thoughts caught up. I shoved the door open. The scene on the other side didn't match the woman I knew. Sarah knelt in the center of the polished floor, palms braced on either side of a demolished food tray. Several bowls lay shattered, their contents splattered across the surface in alien colors and textures. Broth streaked out in a comet tail. Fruit cubes scattered into the corners. Sauces formed chaotic constellations. Her ears were slammed flat against her head, auburn hair falling forward to frame wide amber eyes. Her tail had fluffed out to twice its usual volume, curling around her legs as if trying to hide her. The elegant line of her dress pooled around her knees, already smeared with sauce. She looked small and terrified. Her voice broke, then rushed out all at once. Director Hale, I am so sorry. I misjudged the step. It will not happen again. Please, please, I accept any reprimand. The words weren't just apology. They were frantic, like a dam cracking. She didn't move to clean, not yet. She stayed frozen, as if waiting for something worse than a ruined lunch. Something in my chest twisted. Sarah, I said, keeping my voice low. Hey, are you hurt? Her eyes darted up to mine in genuine confusion, as if the question itself made no sense. Her lips parted, but no words came out. I stepped closer, boots skidding slightly, as I planted myself beside the mess. Up close, I could see the slight tremor running through her shoulders. Carefully, so carefully, I reached out and set a hand on her shoulder. Muscle tensed beneath my fingers, instinctive flinch, then slowly stilled. Her fur-lined ear quivered. Are you hurt? I repeated. Any cuts? Burns? She swallowed. No, Director, She glanced down at the chaos on the floor, as if expecting it to rearrange into a reason for her dismissal. I am not injured. Good, I said. Then we clean it up. Before she could answer, I crouched beside her, grabbed a mostly intact plate, and began gathering shards of broken ceramic into it. The motion felt absurdly domestic in the sleek diplomatic lounge, like something that should have been happening in a cramped kitchen instead of between interstellar meetings. Director, you should not. Ryan, I corrected automatically. We're off the clock for the next 15 minutes, or we were supposed to be. Her tail twitched. Director, Ryan, this is my mistake, my negligence. I should be getting a towel, I said. There's a dispenser by the sink, also maybe a mop. If anyone's head is going to roll over this, it'll be mine for wanting soup in real bowls. That won a startled blink. You are making humor of this? Trying, I admitted. Can't promise quality. There was a moment where nothing moved except the slow drip of broth from the overturned bowl. Her gaze flicked from my face to my hands, back again, like she was trying to locate the missing anger in my expression. When she didn't find it, she pushed herself unsteadily to her feet, bowed her head, and hurried to the sink. As she passed one of the other aides, I caught the quick, pitying glance they gave her, and the wary one they gave me, as if waiting to witness a public dressing down. On some worlds, that was standard procedure. Not here, not with me. While Sarah wrestled with the towel dispenser, I scooped food back onto the tray, then set broken pieces aside to avoid any cuts. A thin streak of sauce landed on my sleeve. I wiped it on my own trousers without much thought. The mess was annoying, sure, but messes could be cleaned. People were harder. Sarah returned with an armful of towels and a bucket that sloshed ominously. She dropped to her knees again beside me, ears still pinning her hair. Director, Ryan, let me handle the worst of it, she said, voice hushed. You should not be seen in this position. Why? Is there a diplomatic clause I missed about the dignity of carrying a sponge? In Avari executive houses, she said quietly, a servant who spills food onto the floor in view of their employer is dismissed immediately, oftentimes in front of witnesses. It is considered an unforgivable failure. I paused, shard of ceramic in hand. The bucket's water rippled between us. Is that what you thought would happen? I asked. Her throat worked as she swallowed. Yes. The word was so soft I almost didn't hear it over the hum of the air vents. I took a breath, choosing my next words with care. Sarah, I hired you because you are terrifyingly competent, not because you are infallible. Everybody drops something eventually, even you. But no. I gave her shoulder a gentle, firm squeeze. You're not losing your job over spilled soup. You're not losing your job over anything short of deliberate sabotage or punching an ambassador. And even then, I'd probably ask what they said to deserve it. A tiny, incredulous sound escaped her, half gasp, half laugh. Her eyes shone in a way that didn't match the admittedly ridiculous situation. You would help me clean, and then forget it? She asked. Pretty much, I said, although I reserve the right to tease you about it in, say, 2 years. That is a long memory for a small incident, she murmured. I'm human, I said. We're stubborn about the things that matter to us. We worked in silence after that, but it was a different silence. She moved faster, more certain, shoulders slowly relaxing as it became clear I truly wasn't going to start shouting. We wiped down the floor, gathered remains, and finally loaded the ruined dishes onto the tray. Her dress was streaked with broth, and her hair clung in damp curls to her neck. Still, she insisted on carrying the tray herself. I will take these to the mess and apologize to the staff, she said. Then I will obtain replacements. Only if you promise not to sprint, I replied. No one's dying of hunger yet. Her ears flicked, a gesture I had learned meant a mix of embarrassment and reluctant amusement. I will walk. She hesitated, fingers curling on the tray's rim. Director, Ryan, thank you, she said finally, eyes not quite meeting mine. Your leniency is more than I deserve. It's not leniency, I said. It's basic decency. And you deserve a lot more than that. Color bloomed along her cheekbones, warm against her pale skin. Her tail gave one betraying swish, then wrapped back around her legs as she bowed and hurried out. I watched her go, a knot of something unfamiliar forming beneath my ribs. Compassion, sure. Relief she wasn't hurt. But there was something else, too. A sharpened awareness of how much fear she'd carried into a moment that should have been trivial. Why had no one ever taught her that mistakes were survivable? And why did it suddenly feel so important that she learned that with me? Sarah returned 20 minutes later with 2 untouched replacement meals and an expression that kept trying and failing to settle back into its usual composed neutrality. Her ears were more relaxed than before, but every few steps they twitched, betraying the thoughts she clearly didn't know what to do with. I ensured the mess staff understood the incident was entirely my responsibility, she said, as she set the new tray down on the table. They were kinder than expected. Because you're good at your job, I said, leaning back in my chair. One accident doesn't erase that. Her hands paused mid-arrangement of utensils. Something flickered across her face, an emotion I couldn't name yet, before she dipped her head politely and placed the last bowl in its exact center position. We ate quietly at first. I tried to pretend nothing unusual had happened, but every time I glanced up, Sarah wasn't looking at her food. She kept stealing glances at me, quick and uncertain, as if checking whether my calm was some kind of extended test. Halfway through my soup, I set my spoon down. What's going on in your head? I asked. She blinked, startled. I am evaluating the remainder of today's schedule. That's a terrible lie, I said gently. You're practically glowing with overthinking. Her tail, which had been resting obediently behind her, curled around her hip like an embarrassed shield. Director, Ryan, your reaction earlier was unexpected. In my culture, I have witnessed far less costly errors end in public humiliation. I watched her carefully. Has that ever happened to you? No, she said quickly, too quickly, but it has happened to those around me. A quiet, unspoken confession lingered in the space between us. I didn't push it. Instead, I shifted gears. You know, where I grew up, dropping food was kind of a daily occurrence. My brother once knocked an entire pot of stew off the counter. We just mopped it up and made grilled cheese instead. Her brows lifted slightly. And your parents did not punish him? They laughed at him, I said, endlessly, for years. A small, surprised breath left her, almost a laugh, barely there. Her shoulders softened. It must be peaceful, she murmured, to make mistakes without fear. That landed far heavier than she intended, and it lodged in my chest. From that moment on, something subtle shifted between us. Not dramatic, not obvious, but noticeable. As we moved through the rest of the day's diplomatic tasks, she stood a little closer. Her voice softened when she spoke my name. Her eyes lingered just a second longer when handing me datapads. At one point, she brushed past me in a narrow hallway, and her tail accidentally, almost certainly accidentally, brushed my leg. She froze instantly. I didn't. You're good, I said lightly. No need to look guilty. Her ears flared a deep shade of red at the tips. She muttered something in Avari under her breath, far too soft for translation, but unmistakably flustered. Later, during a tense resource negotiation with the Solon delegates, she leaned down beside me to whisper an updated figure. Her hair fell across my shoulder, the faint citrus scent brushing the air. Her voice was soft, steady, yet there was a tremble buried under her professionalism, as if she still wasn't done processing what had happened earlier. When the meeting adjourned, one of the Solon ambassadors clapped my arm. Your assistant is impressive, Director Hale. Elegant, controlled. Sarah bowed deeply, but as she rose, her amber eyes darted to me, to see if I echoed that praise. More than impressive, I said. I'd be lost without her. Her breath caught, shoulders stiffening for a heartbeat before she dipped her head again. After hours wrapped around us like coils of gravity, the day finally slowed. I signed off the last report while Sarah arranged the office for tomorrow. She worked efficiently, gracefully, almost like nothing had happened, until she accidentally nudged a stack of data chips and knocked one off the desk. It hit the floor with a soft clatter. She froze. I didn't hesitate. I bent, picked it up, and placed it gently back in her hand. No catastrophe today, I said with a soft smile. Her lips parted just a little. Her pupils dilated slightly. Avari physiology made that more noticeable. Her tail curled forward, brushing her own thigh in a nervous arc. Ryan, she began, but her voice faltered. I waited. I simply have not known a human who responds to mistakes with such calm, she whispered. It is disarming. Good, I said quietly. I don't ever want you afraid of me. Her gaze held mine, longer this time, deeper, softer. Something bloomed there, something tender, something vulnerable, something that looked far too much like the early roots of affection. She looked away quickly, gathering her bag. I will see you tomorrow, Director, she said. Ryan, I corrected again. Her ears heated. Ryan, she repeated softly. And as she stepped out of my office, tail lifting just slightly in a gesture I didn't yet understand, the thought struck me with unexpected clarity. She wasn't just grateful. She was beginning to care. And I, far too aware of every glance, every brush of her tail, was beginning to wonder what that meant for both of us. The next morning began the way most mornings did, with Sarah arriving before I did and organizing the office into a state of quiet perfection. But something was different. I noticed it the moment I stepped through the doorway. She straightened a little too quickly, as if she'd been rehearsing her posture. Her ears lifted, then dipped in a shy half-arc I had never seen from her before. And when she greeted me, her voice carried a softness that felt carefully, intentionally measured. "Good morning, Ryan," she said. Not Director Hale, not Director. Ryan. It startled me more than I let on. "Well," I said, hanging my coat. "That's a very professional tone. Should I be worried you found my performance review template?" One corner of her lips curved in a small smile. "If I had, I would have improved it and returned it before you noticed." "Fair, but I'd still like veto power." "You already misuse veto power." I paused. "Do I?" "Yes." She handed me a datapad. "You vetoed 3 unnecessary meetings last week? On my world, that is the kind of rebellion that inspires legends." I laughed, unable to help it. She looked absurdly pleased with herself for earning that reaction. We fell into our usual rhythm, but the undercurrent was unmistakable. She stood closer, her tail drifting into my peripheral vision now and then, brushing lightly against her own leg or tapping the floor in thought. She was trying not to show too much, trying not to reveal what yesterday had stirred up. But Avari weren't built for hiding feelings. Their tails betrayed them, their ears betrayed them, their eyes betrayed them. Mid-morning, while I was reviewing a diplomatic draft, she brought me tea. Ceramic mug, steam curling gently in the cool office air. Normally, she set it down with efficient precision. This time her fingers brushed mine. A delicate stroke, barely contact, but definite. She didn't pull away, not immediately. Her cheeks warmed with color, and she lowered her gaze. "I apologize," she murmured. "Static charge." "That didn't feel like static," I said quietly. Her ears snapped upright. For a heartbeat, she looked ready to bolt, but instead she straightened the nearby stack of briefs with sudden fascination. "Tea temperature is optimized. If you require anything else, please inform me." I didn't push. Not yet. But it was impossible not to notice how her tail flicked once. Sharp, hopeful. Our next task was a tour of the engineering sector with a visiting delegation. Sarah walked half a pace behind me, the perfect aid on the surface. But every so often I'd catch her watching me, expression softening in the slightest, most vulnerable ways. At one point we passed a cluster of junior officers. One of them whispered, not quietly enough, "Is that the Avari assistant? She's unreal." Before I could intervene, Sarah's ears flattened in discomfort. I glanced at her. "Want me to tell them we're negotiating a new alliance that requires me to break their legs for disrespect?" Her eyes widened in shocked amusement. "Ryan, no. Fine. I'll only break one leg each. Very diplomatic." A laugh escaped her, a real, unrestrained one. She covered her mouth immediately, as if she'd broken protocol. "That sound," I said, "should be illegal to hide." She froze, breath catching for half a second, then lowered her gaze shyly. Her tail curled forward, brushing her own calf. She wasn't used to being complimented, at least not sincerely. The tour ended near the observation deck, where the curve of the planet stretched in luminous blue below us. Delegates drifted toward the windows, admiring the spectacle. Sarah remained at my side. "You are in an unusually light mood today," she said. "Maybe certain people are contagious." Her ears twitched at that. She folded her hands in front of her, staring at the planet, then spoke quietly. "Yesterday, when I dropped the tray." I thought my standing with you had been shattered. It wasn't, I said. Not even close. You say that as if it is obvious. It is obvious to me. She breathed out slowly, almost in disbelief. In Avari's service culture, affection for an employer is considered dangerous. Affection? I repeated. Not teasing, just surprised. She stiffened. I misspoke. I meant respect. But the way she said it, the way her tail wrapped around her leg and her pupils widened with nervous tension, it wasn't respect she meant. It wasn't only that. And I felt it again, that quiet pull between us, growing stronger with every shared glance. The delegates finished their viewing and returned to the corridor. Sarah stepped aside to allow them to pass, but as she did, one of them brushed her shoulder. She flinched, barely visible, but I saw it. Are you all right? I asked softly once they were out of earshot. Yes, she insisted, though her ears betrayed lingering unease. They simply startled me. Because your world taught you to brace for punishment. She closed her eyes for a moment. That was answer enough. As we walked back toward the admin wing, she fell quiet. Not professional quiet. Thoughtful quiet. Tail swaying slowly behind her, brushing the air like she was grounding herself. Once we reached the office, she lingered in the doorway instead of returning to her desk. Ryan, she began. I looked up. Her voice was softer than I had ever heard it. You said yesterday that mistakes are survivable, that I should not fear you. Her hands tightened slightly. I've been thinking about those words. And I prompted gently. She hesitated, 1 second too, then stepped closer to my desk, close enough that her tail brushed the corner behind her. I would like to believe you, she whispered. I stood slowly, coming around the desk, keeping my movements calm so she felt no pressure. When I reached her, I leaned just enough to meet her eyes. I mean, every word, I said. Something melted inside her, a tension I hadn't fully realized she carried. Her ears trembled and her voice dropped to a near silent confession. Then I must learn how to not fear caring. She realized what she'd said, eyes widening, tail puffing slightly in alarm. But she didn't take it back. She didn't run. She just stood there, vulnerable, uncertain, hopeful. And I knew, with absolute clarity, that whatever was growing between us wasn't stopping here. The next week unfolded with an awareness between us so palpable it felt woven into the air of every corridor we walked. It wasn't spoken aloud, not yet, but it shaped the rhythm of our days, softened our conversations, and sharpened the quiet moments when our eyes met just a little too long. Sarah tried, truly tried, to behave as though nothing had changed. But her body betrayed her in a dozen small ways. The gentle sway of her tail when I praised her work. The way her ears angled toward me whenever I spoke, even if she was across the room. The soft, flushed tension she wore whenever she realized I'd caught her staring. And the staring was becoming frequent. That morning, she was organizing a stack of diplomatic packets on my desk when I arrived. I saw her glance up and freeze, not because of anything unusual about my appearance, but because I'd walked in humming under my breath. Her ears perked instantly. You seem happy. I shrugged off my coat. We've survived 3 days of negotiations without a crisis. That's worth celebrating. She hesitated, fingers brushing the edge of a datapad. It is not only that, she murmured. You hum when you are thinking about something pleasant. Oh. I raised a brow. What makes you think I'm thinking about something pleasant? Her tail curled slowly around her leg, as if trying to hide. I am guessing. It wasn't a guess, not really. She was fishing, testing boundaries, and she didn't realize how transparent she was becoming. I stepped closer, just enough to notice how her breath caught in the smallest, softest way she hated people noticing. "Well," I said lightly, "maybe the day has potential." Her ears flushed at the tips, but she smiled to herself and pretended to refocus on her work. Late morning brought a supply audit in one of the storage bays, a task I dreaded, and she approached with lethal organizational precision. As we walked, she held a holotablet in one hand, her other hand hovering near her thigh in case she needed to swipe or scroll. Her tail brushed occasionally against the side of her dress, betraying how her mind wasn't entirely on inventory. Inside the bay, the lights buzzed to life, illuminating towering racks of sealed crates. We worked side by side, calling out serial numbers, cross-checking manifests. Efficient, productive, boring. Until I reached for a crate at the same time she did. Our hands touched, not brushed, not grazed, pressed, warm palm against warm palm, her slender fingers tensing lightly against mine. She froze, completely. I didn't move either. For a moment the bay felt so quiet I could hear the faint shifting of her breath. Her pupils widened, amber darkening to molten gold. Her tail swayed behind her in a slow, helpless arc. "Sarah," I said softly. She blinked as if waking from a trance. Yes?" "We can both lift it," I teased. "Unless Avari tradition says only one person is allowed to touch a crate at a time." Her lips parted, then curved into something fragile and sweet. "Not a tradition I am aware of." We lifted the crate together. Her shoulder brushed mine on the way up. She didn't step back when we set it down. Not this time. By early afternoon, we were back in the office, finalizing the weekly briefing. I updated the file while she stood beside me, reading the screen over my shoulder. Her proximity was nothing new, but today she stayed closer than ever. Close enough that I felt the warmth of her arm. Close enough that a strand of her hair slipped forward and touched my wrist. Close enough that she forgot to pretend she wasn't trembling slightly. "Sarah," I said quietly. She didn't move away. "Yes?" I'm not going to pretend I don't notice what's happening. Her breath caught, not in fear, but in a sudden, vulnerable opening of emotion she couldn't hide. Her ears drew back slightly, uncertain, but not retreating. She swallowed. "I am trying to behave appropriately. Maybe you don't have to try so hard." Her eyes lifted to mine, slowly, carefully, like stepping toward the edge of something she'd never been allowed to approach before. "Ryan," she whispered, "you do not understand the risk for me. If an Avari assistant grows attached to an employer, it is considered a breach of decorum. Disgraceful. Do you think it's disgraceful?" A long silence. "No," she breathed. "Then it isn't." Her tail curled forward and brushed lightly against my leg, instinctive, unconscious, tender. When she realized what she'd done, her entire body jolted as if she'd stepped into open flame. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" "Sarah." I caught her gently by the arm before she could flee across the room. "You don't have to apologize to me for caring." Her eyes shimmered with something raw. She didn't pull away from my touch. She leaned into it, barely, but unmistakably. The door chime rang. She jumped a foot back, ears snapping upright, tail puffing in pure panic. I stepped aside just in time for Admiral Verson to stride in, all stern expression and clipped authority. "Director Hale," the Admiral said, "we need a moment." Sarah straightened instantly, mask sliding into place, too quick, too perfect. But before she left the room, she cast me a tiny glance, hopeful and terrified all at once. The meeting dragged on nearly an hour, full of political tension and resource demands I didn't have the patience for. But when it ended and the Admiral left, Sarah slipped back inside with a datapad and worry in her eyes. "You seem frustrated," she said softly. "I'm fine," I said, rubbing my forehead. Just tired of being talked at by people who think empathy is a malfunction. She hesitated, then stepped close again, closer than before. Her tail brushed forward, shy but deliberate. Empathy, she whispered, is not a malfunction. Something inside me tightened, warmed, anchored. Without thinking, I reached up and tucked a loose strand of her hair behind her ear, slowly, gently, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Her breath softened. Her lashes lowered just slightly, the barest sign of trust blooming in real time. "Ryan," she murmured, barely audible. "I do not know what happens next." I smiled. "We figure it out." Her eyes glowed with something that wasn't fear anymore. Something like hope. Sarah arrived early the next morning, earlier than usual, which was impressive, considering she already beat half the station staff to their own offices. But today, something was off. I noticed it the moment I stepped through the door. She wasn't at her desk. She wasn't arranging datapads. She wasn't preparing my tea. She was standing at the window, arms wrapped around herself, tail drawn tight around her legs like a protective coil. Her ears were pinned flat, not anxious, not embarrassed, worried. "Sarah?" I asked softly. She turned, startled. For a heartbeat, something unguarded flashed across her face. Fear, not of me, but of something else entirely. She opened her mouth to greet me, hesitated, then offered a strained smile. "Good morning, Ryan." Her voice was thin, too thin, and wrong. What happened? She looked down. "A message arrived from the Avari embassy shortly before you entered." A cold weight settled in my chest. Sarah never mentioned personal messages from her people. She rarely received any. And when she did, she read them stone-faced, unreadable. Not today. "What did they say?" I asked. She swallowed, eyes drifting toward her holopad resting on my desk. "There is rumor among the Avari staff that I have become compromisingly close to you." My jaw tensed. "Compromisingly close," I repeated. "Meaning what exactly?" Her ears twitched with pained embarrassment. "Meaning they believe I am forming an attachment, a personal one, in violation of Avari decorum." I walked closer, stopping just a breath away from her. And, she whispered, "they may open an inquiry." I blinked. "An inquiry? About us talking? About me treating you like a person instead of property?" Her tail curled tighter. "To them, that distinction does not matter. Assistants in high diplomatic roles must remain emotionally neutral. It is believed that affection leads to compromised judgment. And you don't actually believe that?" "No," she said, voice firm despite her trembling. "I do not." "Then why are you scared?" She looked up at me then, eyes shining, vulnerable in a way she'd never allowed herself to be. "Because I do not wish to be reassigned." A silence fell between us, heavy, electric, absolute. "Reassigned?" I echoed. "Yes. If the inquiry proceeds, they may remove me from my post, they may place me under a different director, or—" Her voice caught. "Send me back to Avari Prime for retraining." I felt something sharp pierce my chest. The idea of losing her, of walking into this office, not seeing her soft ears perk at my arrival, not hearing her quiet laugh, not feeling her presence beside me, hit harder than I expected. "That's not going to happen," I said immediately. "You cannot stop an embassy investigation," she murmured. "Maybe not. But I'm not letting them punish you for caring about me." Her breath shuddered. "Ryan, you are not the one being punished." "I'm being punished if they take you away," I said before I could think better of it. Her eyes widened. Her tail lifted slightly, trembling in surprise. "You She swallowed. You would miss me? Yes, I said simply. More than I should. Her ears lifted halfway, hope flickering through the fear. But before anything else could be said, the door chimed. We both turned as a tall, silver-coated Avari man stepped inside without waiting for permission. His posture was rigid, his expression coldly polite. He inclined his head to me, but his eyes went straight to Sarah. Assistant Sarah Nyali, he said. You did not report to the Avari administrative wing as instructed. She stiffened. I was preparing the director's office for the day. This matter supersedes your duties. He stepped further inside. You are to accompany me immediately for preliminary inquiry. I moved between them without thinking. She's not going anywhere without knowing what the accusation is, I said. He blinked, clearly surprised I'd intervened. Director Hale, this is an internal Avari disciplinary matter. Your involvement is not permitted. Everything involving my assistant involves me. Sarah's breath fluttered, her eyes darting between us. The man, Council Attaché Corvin, according to his badge, folded his hands behind his back. Rumors suggest inappropriate emotional entanglement between Assistant Nyali and yourself. While only rumor, the embassy must ensure neutrality. Inappropriate, I repeated coldly. Meaning someone saw her smile at me and decided it was a crisis? Meaning, Corvin said with icy precision, she is suspected of harboring personal feelings. My heartbeat thundered. And that, I replied, is punishable? For an assistant in a high post, yes. Sarah flinched. Corvin continued. She will submit to questioning. If she fails to demonstrate emotional neutrality, reassignment or disciplinary action may follow. No, I said. Corvin's brows shot up. Director Hale, you do not have the authority. I said no. She's not being interrogated for being a decent person. This is not about decency. It absolutely is. My voice was sharp enough that Sarah gasped softly behind me. Corvin stepped closer, unimpressed. Director, your emotional involvement clouds your judgment. You bet it does, I said. Because she's the most capable, loyal, hard-working person I've ever employed. And the idea of punishing her for feeling anything is absurd. Sarah made a tiny sound, one that wasn't fear this time. Something softer, something like disbelief. Corvin narrowed his eyes. Your reaction confirms the concern. It confirms that I'm human, I snapped. We care about people we work with. It's not a crime. For Avari officers, Corvin corrected coldly, it is a breach of discipline. Sarah stepped forward finally. Attaché Corvin, please, I will cooperate. I do not wish to jeopardize Director Hale's standing. You're not jeopardizing me, I said, turning to her. They're jeopardizing you. She looked up at me with a trembling softness that nearly broke me. Ryan, I cannot allow you to take the consequences meant for me. There won't be any consequences, I whispered. I won't let there be. Her tail brushed lightly against my leg, seeking comfort she wasn't sure she was allowed to ask for. Corvin cleared his throat. We're leaving, now. Sarah closed her eyes, gathering herself. But before she could step toward him, I reached out and gently took her hand. She froze. Corvin stiffened. Director, release her, immediately. I didn't. Sarah, I said softly, firmly, you're not alone. Not in this. Not anymore. Her eyes opened, shining, stunned, full. And in that moment, something inside her cracked open, wider and brighter than fear ever allowed. She squeezed my hand back. Sarah's fingers tightened around mine, soft, trembling, but unmistakably deliberate. Corvin's expression fractured into shock, then hardened into something colder than polished steel. This confirms everything. he said sharply. Assistant Niali, you will remove your hand from the director and report for inquiry immediately. Sarah didn't move. Her tail wrapped tighter around her leg, ears pinning flat again. But she didn't release me, not even a fraction. I do not consent, she whispered. Corvin blinked, visibly thrown. Assistant Niali, this is not a choice. It is, she said more firmly. It must be. My culture may demand obedience, but I am also assigned under human jurisdiction. I have the right to refuse disciplinary action for non-violations. Corvin scoffed. Emotional entanglement with an employer is a violation. Not under human codes, I said, and she works in a human-run embassy. Her heritage supersedes your workplace norms. I stepped forward just slightly, placing myself between them again. Her well-being supersedes both. Sarah looked up at me with wide, luminous eyes, as if she couldn't quite believe I kept choosing her. Publicly, openly, without hesitation. Corvin's composure cracked further. Director Hale, your conduct is bordering on obstruction. My conduct is protecting someone from an unnecessary interrogation intended to shame her. That someone, he hissed, has breached Avari decorum in a way that reflects on her entire caste. Sarah flinched, not because she agreed, but because those words carried weight she'd been trained her whole life to fear. And I hated the way fear dimmed her. No, I said firmly. She hasn't breached anything. She made a human mistake, and she's allowed to have human emotions about it. Corvin turned his stare on her. Assistant Niali, has the director influenced you? Encouraged improper attachment? Sarah's ears shot up in sheer indignation. No, never. Then you admit the attachment exists? She froze, a deer in a spotlight, not because she was guilty, but because the question struck the center of every rule she'd ever obeyed. Corvin's tail lashed once, a rare display of agitation for an Avari of his rank. Your silence is an admission. Sarah opened her mouth, but her voice failed her. I moved gently closer until my shoulder brushed hers, steadying, grounding. Sarah doesn't answer to you, I said slowly. Not right now. Not like this. She must answer to someone. She answers to herself, I said. And the fact that this is the first time she's been allowed to do that is exactly the problem. Corvin inhaled sharply. You are provoking disciplinary escalation, Director Hale. No, I said. I'm stopping it. Sarah looked between us, eyes darting with frantic emotion. Then she stepped forward, not away from me, but toward the conflict itself. Attaché Corvin, she said, voice trembling but steady. I have served with honor. I have never compromised my duties. I have never placed the Avari embassy at risk. I have given my diligence, my professionalism, and my time to the station without fault. Corvin's ears flicked. And yet you stand holding the director's hand like a person, she whispered. That threw him. That is weakness, he said. That is freedom, she replied. My chest tightened. Corvin shook his head in disbelief. Assistant Niali, Sarah, you are disgracing your position. Sarah straightened at that. Back tall, shoulders firm, tail lowering from its defensive curl. No, she said quietly. I am discovering who I am beyond it. Corvin's gaze sharpened. Then you leave me no choice. You are to be relieved of your duties, effective immediately. Pack your belongings. Report to the Avari wing for reassignment review. My pulse spiked. Absolutely not. Sarah lifted a hand toward me, not touching, but asking for a pause. Her voice softened, not for Corvin, but for me. Ryan, I cannot fight the entire embassy. You shouldn't have to, I said. You're not alone. Her eyes glistened. Corvin bristled. Director Hale, if you continue to interfere, we will file a formal diplomatic grievance. Do it, I said. Corvin went rigid. You dare? I dare to protect my assistant, and I dare to say this is discriminatory, unethical, and unacceptable behavior towards someone who has done nothing wrong. This is Avari protocol. This is Avari control, I countered, not protocol. Sarah's breath trembled at the word control. I saw it strike something deep inside her, something old and painful. Corvin took a step toward her. Assistant Nyali, you will follow. No. Her voice rang out, unexpectedly strong. I will not. He froze. I exhaled slowly. Sarah. She looked at me, not seeking permission, but strength. And maybe she didn't realize it. But I saw in that instant that she was finally taking her life into her own hands. I am not abandoning my post, she said. I am not abandoning my work. And I am not abandoning the person who treated me with kindness when I was at my lowest. Corvin's face twisted. Kindness is irrelevant. Not to me, she whispered. She stepped closer to me, tail unfurling just slightly behind her, instinctively protective. My decision stands. Corvin glared between us, realizing control was slipping through his fingers. This is not over, he said coldly. You have both escalated matters beyond protocol. There will be consequences. Then he turned sharply and stormed out, the door hissing shut behind him. Silence descended. Sarah's shoulders collapsed the moment he was gone. She leaned against the desk, trembling quietly, ears drooping. She swallowed hard. I have never spoken back to an Avari superior. You were incredible, I said, stepping closer. Her eyes lifted to mine, uncertain, frightened, but shining with something new. Ryan, I may have just ruined my career. No, I said gently. You just claimed your life. Her breath wavered, and before she could crumble, I reached out and placed a hand over hers. She clung to it, not like an assistant seeking reassurance, but like a woman choosing someone she trusted. Sarah didn't let go of my hand, not even after Corvin was long gone. Her grip trembled, soft and frightened, but anchored in something she was no longer willing to deny. She stared down at our hands, a flush rising along her cheekbones, then looked up at me like she was bracing for whatever came next. But before either of us could speak, the door chimed again. Her ears shot straight up. No. It's all right, I murmured, though I wasn't entirely sure it was. The door slid open to reveal Ambassador Ryle of the Avari Embassy. Higher ranking, older, and far more formidable than Corvin. His silver-lined robes swept across the floor as he entered, gaze sharp and measuring. His tail, marked with ceremonial rings, swayed with heavy judgment. Director Hale, he said with slow, icy precision. Assistant Nyali, your conduct has come to my attention. Sarah stiffened, fingers tightening around mine. I didn't pull away. Ryle's eyes flicked to our joined hands. They darkened. I see the rumors are not rumors after all. I stepped forward half a pace, shielding her instinctively. Ambassador, Sarah has done nothing unethical. She's done nothing wrong. That is not for you to decide. With respect, I said, it is absolutely for me to decide whether she's violated human workplace protocols, and she hasn't. Riel's expression didn't change, but the room's air seemed to constrict around us. Assistant Nyali holds dual obligations, Avari decorum and station duty. If she has compromised one, the consequences are ours to determine. You want to punish her for having feelings? I said. That's not discipline. That's cruelty dressed as tradition. Riel's gaze hardened. Director Hale, you are interfering with internal cultural standards. That is a diplomatic breach. No, I countered. What you're doing is a human rights breach. Sarah's breath stuttered, tail curling protectively behind her. She looked between us, heart pounding so visibly I could almost feel it beneath her skin. Ryle shifted his glare to her. Assistant Niali, you will speak honestly. Do you harbor affection for the director? Sarah's eyes widened in sheer panic. It is not. Ambassador, you may answer, he commanded. She looked overwhelmed, trembling, torn between two worlds. She opened her mouth, but the words tangled in her throat. I stepped closer, my voice steady. She doesn't owe you her heart as a reportable item. You overstep? No, I said. You do. Rael's tail lashed once, controlled, but unmistakably irritated. Your influence over her judgment is obvious. Assistant Niali will be reassigned immediately. A transfer request has already been signed. She will leave your service by end of day. Sarah's breath fractured. No. Ambassador, please. Ryle lifted a hand. Silence. Her ears collapsed downward in instinctive submission, a posture drilled into her from childhood. I felt a visceral surge of anger. No, I said, stepping between them again. Don't talk to her like that. Ryle's gaze snapped to me. Director Hale, you will respect my authority. I'll respect basic dignity. You haven't shown any toward her? Sarah's eyes glistened with tears she was fighting desperately to hide. She whispered, voice barely audible. Ryan, please don't jeopardize your role because of me. I turned to her. Sarah, you are worth whatever this costs. Her breath caught so sharply I thought she might collapse. Ryle exhaled slowly. Emotional compromise confirmed. The reassignment stands. No, Sarah whispered, horror spreading through her. No, Ambassador, please. I don't want to leave this post. I don't want to leave. She stopped herself, choking on the truth she couldn't say aloud. Ryle's eyes narrowed. Your attachment has made you unfit to continue. That was the moment she broke. Not in fear, in defiance. Her ears rose, her spine straightened, her tail unfurled in a bold, sweeping arc I'd never seen from her. She stepped forward, trembling but resolute. Ambassador, she said, voice unsteady but courageous. I refuse reassignment. Silence. Rio blinked, stunned. You refuse? Yes. This is not permissible. It is now. He stared at her as though witnessing a cultural taboo shatter in real time. You disgrace your caste. No, she whispered. I honor myself. Rill's composure slipped for a heartbeat, but he recovered quickly. Then, you will resign your Avari designation. Sarah inhaled sharply. Her eyes filled with pain, real pain. Her designation was her heritage, her identity, her community. She wavered, and I stepped closer, gently resting my hand on her back, just between the shoulders where she carried all her fear. Sarah, I murmured, you don't have to give up who you are. You only have to choose who you want to be. Her trembling slowed. She looked up at me, soft, searching, full of a bravery she didn't know she had, then back at Ryle. And with a quiet breath, she said, Then I resign. Ryle staggered backward, half a step, genuinely shaken. You cannot. This is unprecedented. It is done, Sarah said. Her voice was calm now, strong, free. Ryle's jaw clenched. You will regret this choice. No, she replied. I will regret not making it. The ambassador glared, tail whipping once in furious tension, then turned sharply and stormed out, the door snapping shut behind him with a hiss of finality. Silence washed over the room. Sarah stood there, breath trembling, eyes wide, ears lifted in terrified triumph. Then she turned toward me, slowly, as if scared to see what my face might reveal. Ryan, she whispered. And before she could crumble under the weight of what she'd done, I stepped forward and wrapped my arms around her. She melted into me instantly. Her hands clung to my shirt, her tail curled around my leg, and she buried her face against my chest, not as an assistant seeking protection, but as a woman finally allowed to choose her own life. I'm here, I whispered into her hair. I'm not going anywhere. Her voice trembled against me. I chose you, she breathed. And I choose you, I said. She shuddered, not in fear, but in overwhelming relief. The embassy felt different after that, quieter, somehow gentler, as if the halls themselves recognized that something monumental had shifted. Word spread quickly, of course. Avari staff avoided eye contact when Sarah passed, unsure whether to treat her with caution, curiosity, or stunned disbelief. Human employees, by contrast, offered her small nods or quiet smiles, sensing she had taken a brave, personal leap even without understanding its cultural weight. Through all of it, she stayed close to me. Not clinging, Sarah wasn't the type, but choosing proximity with every silent, steady step. When we walked side by side, her tail brushed just slightly behind her, like it wanted to hold on to something but wasn't sure how. After the confrontation, I let her sit on the office couch for as long as she needed. She curled carefully, knees drawn in, tail tucked around her in a soft ring of copper. She watched the city beyond the station windows with distant eyes. Not regretful, not grieving, but quiet in a way that suggested she was rebuilding her understanding of herself piece by piece. I brewed tea because it was the only thing I knew to do, and carried a cup over to her. She accepted it with both hands, ears dipping. Thank you. Always, I said, sitting beside her. Her fingers trembled slightly around the cup. I truly am free from the designation now. Does it hurt? I asked gently. Yes, she murmured, but not in the way I expected. Her tail uncurled slowly, resting against my leg, a shy, instinctive gesture. It hurts like shedding something heavy. It aches, but also brings air I've never breathed before. I let her take her time. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was warm, stretching softly across the small couch and gathering us closer. Ryan, she said finally, did I make things harder for you? Diplomatically, I mean. Probably, I admitted. But I've handled angry ambassadors before. I can't handle this. Her gaze softened. You should not have to. I know, I said, but I'm with you in this, all the way through. Her cheeks heated, a soft, rosy bloom. You say that so easily. Because it's true. She looked down at the cup in her lap. After a moment, her shoulder leaned gently against mine. I do not understand how humans carry emotion with such fearlessness. We're not fearless, I said. We're just stubborn and hopeful enough to try. She smiled at that. Small, barely there, but beautiful. There was still work to do, of course. Meetings hadn't stopped for our emotional crisis. So, later that afternoon, we found ourselves standing in front of a skeptical interspecies commerce panel, presenting our joint proposal as if Sarah hadn't just upended her entire cultural identity a few hours earlier. Her professionalism was flawless. Calm voice, perfect posture, ears controlled, tail steady. But she kept glancing at me. Not for guidance, not for direction, just to be sure I was still there. After the meeting ended, one of the human advisors pulled me aside. Is your assistant all right? She seems different. She's adjusting, I said simply, but she'll be fine. When we stepped back into the main hall, I felt her gaze on me again. I turned to find her looking up with that same softened expression, vulnerable, full, and very slightly overwhelmed. Ryan, she began. I held out my hand gently, not taking hers, just offering. She stared at it, breath trembling. Then, with a tentative, reverent motion, she placed her hand in mine. Warm, delicate, certain. We walked like that back to my office. When the door closed behind us, she let out a slow, shaky breath. "Today," she whispered, "I became someone my people might no longer recognize." I faced her fully. "Then let me be the first to recognize you." Her ears lifted. "As who?" "As Sarah. Not a title, not a role, not a designation." I brushed a stray lock of hair from her face, slow enough to give her room to pull away. She didn't. "As the woman who's braver than anyone I've ever met." She blinked rapidly, eyes shining again. But this time, it wasn't fear or sorrow. It was gratitude. Soft, quiet, transforming. She stepped closer, tail curling toward me, and rested her forehead lightly against my chest. "I do not know what tomorrow brings," she whispered. "We'll meet it together," I said. Her voice trembled. "I want that, more than anything." I wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Light, warm, protective. She melted into the embrace, letting her weight rest against me as if trusting fully for the first time. In that quiet office on a station full of stars, Sarah allowed herself something she had never dared before. Peace. And for the rest of the day, she stayed close, her presence warm and steady, her steps lighter than I'd ever seen them. As if choosing her own life had finally made room for hope. The days that followed settled into a gentler rhythm, not because the embassy slowed down, but because Sarah had. She moved differently now. Not cautiously, not fearfully, but deliberately, as if relearning the weight of her own steps. Every morning she entered my office with a soft greeting, ears lifted, tail swaying in a quiet, contented arc she no longer tried to hide. And every morning, I felt something in my chest loosen a little more. She wasn't an assistant fulfilling a role anymore. She was a woman discovering her life. One evening, after the last briefing wrapped and the lights outside the station dimmed into a wash of blues and silvers, she lingered at my desk instead of gathering her things to leave. "Ryan," she said softly, "do you have a moment? For you? Always." Her ears fluttered, shy. "I would like to ask something." "Ask anything." She came around the desk, steps quiet, hands clasped lightly in front of her. When she stopped beside me, her tail brushed my leg, tentative but unmistakably affectionate. "Now that I am free of my Avari constraints," she said, "I would like to try something human." I raised a brow gently. "Such as?" She hesitated, lowering her gaze to the floor. "A date." My heart gave a single, sharp jump. "A date?" I echoed. "Yes," she said, looking up again with steady, glowing eyes. "A human courtship custom, a way to spend time together, intentionally." She paused, swallowing. "I would like to try that. With you." I stood slowly, careful not to crowd her. Her ears flicked in nervous anticipation. "I would like that," I said. "Very much." Her entire posture softened, relief and happiness blending into something fragile and sweet. "Then, when would be acceptable?" "Tomorrow evening," I said, "if that works for you." "It does," she whispered. Her hand drifted toward mine, hesitating, hovering. I took the final inch and closed the gap. She exhaled, a soft, trembling sound of acceptance, and intertwined her fingers with mine. Her tail curled around her legs, then flicked forward in an unconscious burst of joy. We stood there for a moment, letting the quiet of the office hold us. It felt easy, natural, right. Later, as the station lights dimmed into their nighttime cycle, I walked her to her quarters. The corridor was nearly empty, the long windows spilling starlight across the floor. She walked beside me with her hand still in mine, ears drifting in relaxed arcs. Outside her door, she turned to face me fully. "I still cannot believe I chose this path," she said softly. "Chose you." "You could have chosen safety," I said. "Tradition, familiarity. But I chose the person who saw me," she finished. I brushed a thumb lightly across the back of her hand. "And I'll keep seeing you." Her breath trembled with quiet emotion. She stepped closer, tail curling forward until it brushed my hip. A gesture I was learning meant openness, trust, hope. Her eyes lifted, luminous and warm. "Ryan," she murmured, "may I do one more human thing? Anything you want." She rose onto her toes and kissed me. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't urgent. It was soft and careful, like she was testing a new language she had only heard in passing but somehow already understood. Her fingers tightened gently around mine, her tail curling fully around us in a slow, protective loop. When she drew back, she looked startled at her own boldness, and then shyly delighted by my smile. "I will see you tomorrow," she whispered. "I'll be counting the hours." She laughed softly, light, heart-warming, free, and slipped into her quarters. The door closed behind her, leaving me standing alone in the corridor with the warmth of her kiss still lingering on my lips. The next evening came faster than either of us expected. She met me at the observation deck, dressed in a simple navy dress that matched her eyes and made the copper of her tail shine brighter. The stars framed her silhouette like a crown. "This is human attire for dates, yes?" she asked uncertainly. "It's perfect," I said, and meant it. We dined at the quiet corner restaurant overlooking the station's lower ring. She asked endless questions about human dating rituals. Why flowers mattered, why people held hands, why dessert seemed mandatory. I answered each one, laughing gently as she absorbed everything with earnest curiosity. When she reached across the table to take my hand again, she didn't hesitate. "I was afraid," she said quietly, "afraid to lose everything. But I gained more than I expected." "You gained your freedom." "And you," she said softly. After dinner, we walked through the gardens placed along the station's interior curve, artificial fireflies drifting like starlight caught in leaves. The air was warm, gentle, full of quiet life. She stopped beneath one of the soft glowing trees and turned to me. "Ryan," she whispered, "may I kiss you again?" "You never have to ask," I said. She kissed me, longer this time, deeper, still soft, but filled with blooming confidence. Her hand slid up to my shoulders, her tail curling around my waist like an embrace all its own. When we finally parted, she rested her forehead against mine, breathing softly. "I do not know what our future holds," she murmured. "I do," I said. "It holds us, wherever that leads." Her ears tilted forward, hopeful. She squeezed my hand. "Then I am ready for all of it." And beneath the glow of artificial stars, with her tail wrapped protectively around us both, our new life together, unbound, chosen, and astonishingly human, truly began. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming HFY sci-fi romances just like this one.